Bob
Okay.
McTavish, welcome to the BoardRoom podcast. It's good to see you this morning. How are you this morning?
Fine, fit, healthy. Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, Bob, you, our icon of foam for 2024, you'll be visiting us here in California in October, and we're excited about that.
So am I. It's a real
You,
privilege.
yeah. Bob, I'm gonna ask you, and I know you've been asked this a million times. Let's make it 1,000,001. I'd like you to tell me the story, if you would, please, the unabridged story of you and George Greenough and the shortboard revolution way back in the early 60s. Where did you first meet George Greenough?
He came walking along the beach at Alexander Headlands on a weekday. I was shaping for Hayden Kenny, and he had a great little surfboard factory, which consisted of two small retail stores with glass windows out onto the street. And across the road is a park and the Alexander Head Surf Club and the surf break right in front. So that I can see the surf looking out the windows of the surfboard factory. So I was across the beach with Bob Cooper, who was the glasser. I was the shaper. Cooper was the glasser. The other guys were Algie Grudd was the sander, Russell Hughes the gloss coater, and Hayden Kenny was the boss. And we were making like 10 boards a week. And I shaped the Monday, Tuesday, and then whenever Noosa was good, which is just up the road, we'd find our way there and surf. Okay, so 64, I was on the beach with Cooper and I see this young, I thought it was a kid, wagging school because this guy was walking and jauntily ambling along. And as he got closer, I realised he was older, but he had a mop of blonde hair, cutting a basin cut. And Cooper says, here's George. I said, what? Yeah, this is my friend George Greenough from California. And we were just checking the surf, and he just wandered up and started talking. And you don't turn George off. And we became instant friends. Like within an hour, I was just fascinated by this human talking machine telling me all about California. And Cooper sort of faded out of the conversation and walked away. And I just listened to George all day about Santa Barbara and surfing and fishing, boats and surfing and fishing, boards, boats, fish, sharks. I was just wrapped. And then Cooper said, could we put him up for a few weeks? And we said, sure. So we had a flop house we were all sharing. And George stayed with us. I don't know, that trip was fairly quick, maybe only 4 or 5 weeks. But within an hour, he trotted out the board he bought, which was Velo #1, which was solid balsa. And it was not flexible. It was just a pure balsa board, 4'8" long. So the surf was rubbish for a couple of days, and I was shaping when an Algie Grudd came racing in, the sander, and he said, Bob, get over here and watch this, and ran across the street, a little break we call Pipeline, because they had a steel pipe sticking out of the sand. And there's George on a healthy 4 or 5 foot wave, a break, and beach breaks. And he was, for the first time I saw someone carving all over the face of the wave. Because previously, at that stage, we were Mickey Dora freaks, right?
Yeah.
And Cooper had told us all the Dora stories. So everything was turn and trim. And we had Bruce Brown's movies that would visit here and there. We had no video or anything like that. If there was a movie in Brisbane, we'd get down there 75 miles away to see it. And it was George doing this stuff totally different. Taking the drop, carving a sweet bottom turn up into the lip, and doing a wrap, then dropping again. Or he was gaining speed and running out in the shoulder and doing what he called his roundhouse cut back and sweeping back and wrapping around the lip again. And And we only, our longboard knowledge was basically turn and trim with some hot dogging or climbing and dropping involved, which was basically done from the tail, but it wasn't done with carving power and grace. So he was carving and putting tracks on.
Did Bob Cooper warn you or tell you about what you were about to see? Bob must have known. Did Bob not know that George was this ripping kneeboarder that was surfing in ways you hadn't ever seen before?
Yeah, but Cooper, Cooper was a beatnik, and to extract words out of Cooper only came when Cooper was willing. And we were rugrats, we were crazy little blonde-headed terrorists. I mean, I was 7. How old was I? I was 19. Yeah, and Algie was the same, and Russell was younger, and we just surf crazed idiots.
Yeah.
But as soon as we saw it, we just went, "That's it! Look at that! That's what we're going to do standing up." And that took 5 minutes to realise that.
Yeah.
But it was 1964, and we were enthralled firstly by Phil through Bruce Brown's movies, and then Dora, and we used to pummel Cooper for Dora stories and extract everything we could about Dora. Yeah. In fact, when those crazy beach party movies came, because Dora was a stunt, no, he was just a fill-in, one of the bodies in the show, we'd find a way to see that movie over and over again, just to get a glimpse of Mickey Dora. Yeah. Dancing or driving with some chick, and then we'd fill in the rest in our minds. So It was hard to, and we were living so close to Noosa and surfing Noosa all the time. We wanted to surf Dora-esque.
Yeah.
And so, it was hard to sort of, after watching George surf that morning, I immediately went and found a junkie blank, slapped his board down on it, drew a template around it, shaped and glassed a copy of George's kneeboard.
Yeah.
It's 1964. Russell and I tried to surf it. We tried to surf at a little junkie place called The Bluff, which is a little piddly 2-foot soft wave. Mm-hmm. We could barely get the thing going.
Yeah.
And we tried it on the beach break again, barely get the thing going. So we just pushed that thing in the corner. And George went back to California after a few weeks and went back to being Dora freaks. We put it off for another year till George came back next year.
Let me interrupt you there because I got a question about this. The velo, the balsa velo that George had, wasn't it carved out and scooped out and super thin back where his knees and his feet were?
No, it was still a couple of inches thick. It wasn't. But when he went home that year, he came back next year earlier for a longer time. So he came back for like about May in 65, and he molded, took a molding off the bottom of that balsa board, and then glued some foam strips and foam chunks up around the front to give it some positive buoyancy, and then glassed the deck and kept laminating until it was like 16 layers thick around the fin, but tapered out in the corners. So he came back in 65 with a flexible version of the velo, which was just mind-blowing. And we saw his rocker. His rocker was dead straight in the tail and dead flat across. And so the peak of the power was on the fin, and everything was built around the fin. And from then on, we just went, well, speed has to be related to that dead straight rocker. And that was a hindrance for our surfboard design for the next 10 or 15 years, because, dead straight rockers in the tail. I mean, I was a slave to that concept for the next 15 years until finally we found it. When I finally made a flexible tail board with boogie foam glued on the deck to give it buoyancy, and I finally had what I thought was the ideal surfboard, took it out at Spot X down near Flat Rock here, paddled out, first bottom turn, unbelievable driving speed, hit the lip, and the thing just nosedived, because as soon as you go weightless, the rocker flexes flat and just drives the nose in. But that didn't bother George because his was 4'8", mine was 6'4". And he's 4'8", he's on his knees, he just grabs the rail and survives the drop, just twists the board in midair, lands, and then grabs the rail and pulls it around. Then I finally realised that stiff rocker, even with a flexible tail, is not for stand-up surfing because we go weightless and our feet, at times, we go weightless when you hit the lip and you're driving down or free falling back down. Stiff rockers kill you. You've got to have tail rocker. And I didn't realise that tail rocker was vital until, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago. It took me so long to get away from the George dead stiff rocker.
And during this time, say 65, George's second trip to visit Byron or Noosa, were you guys having lengthy discussions about board design? Like
just all day and all night.
And were you going out and getting materials and building boards? Like what was there some surfboard that a lot of boards that were made that were just like, uh-oh, and you just threw them away because they didn't work? Like what? And what was George doing? Was George going, maybe you guys should start knee ride and become knee riders?
Well, no, we never wanted a knee ride, partly because of Phil. We loved Phil first and then Dora. Then Rennie Yater came out in 65 and watching Rennie surf Noosa, super impressed with his work. So I was emulating his rails and mainly his rockers. I did start to flatten them forward more than Rennie's boards, but so no, we're very dedicated to stand-up surfing. And But yes, we talked surf endlessly with George. Every night we would talk until we crashed, you know. George never drunk, but I'd often have a bottle of wine and we'd talk till forever. And the share house we had George built us a fireplace, had two wash tubs and some downpipe he took off the outside. Yeah. So all through winter we were sitting around the fire and Kevin Platt was playing guitars and a couple of other Californian dudes dropping through with guitars and stuff. And so it was music around the fire, and I'd just be talking to George until I crashed and start again next day. And in that period, I made, with Darryl Dell, a guy called Rooster and I made, in 65, we made a flat bottom, like a Greenough stand-up board, but we made a false deck over the tail, and like we call it a B tail, we called it, because it had a foam and glass body, but then the flat plane of George's flexible bottom plate was there, and the thing came down through a slot through it, so the thing could flex in the turns, then straighten out for trim. So finally, Rooster and I built this thing over a week and a half, so very complicated glassing. This is all at Hayden Kenny's factory. Put it in the water at Alexander Heads, went to paddle it out with Rooster. And the weight that the glass added in the tail meant the thing sunk in the tail. You're trying to paddle the thing out and you go, what a waste. What a waste of time and energy building this thing, you know. And so once again, we were frustrated by the Greenough flex concept that we're trying to integrate into surfing. And we were slaves, but somehow we were going to achieve this flexible board. And that thing I told you about a couple of minutes ago about down at Spot X, well, that was like late 70s. Yeah. It took that long. We were slaving to get a flex tail board that worked.
But and the whole time you're engaged with this idea that we want to surf our surfboards the way that Greenough is surfing his knee board. You're also still enthused with the way Phil's style and Dora's style and for sure Rennie's style. And at some point, you had a breakthrough. And I'm assuming it's 67 where you're like, I think I finally figured it out.
So 67, I was at a loose end at Sunshine Coast. I had a little factory, Mooloolaba, the old ice works, and I was making a few boards there. And this was, we went in what's called the involvement era after that, which was Nat and I working together a lot. We'd gone beyond Dora into our own direction, which was involvement. Nat and I were keen on like staying tight around the lip, surfing deeper, making sure you could stay around the lip. And when we watched California, they tended, like say, Danny Oberg came out and loved Danny, best mates forever. But Danny would surf in the soft shoulder. You know, we'd be back getting smashed by the lip and hunting the barrel and you know, so involved with the mouth of the curl that Nat and I dubbed it involvement surfing. And we're off the tail. Everything's off the tail with the occasional nose ride to stall back into it. You know, and nose rides were stalling nose rides compared to say Nueva, who perched, you know, the hood ornament nose rides. So we developed this in '66, and Nat went off and won the world contest surfing that style. And that's the kinds of boards I was making at that stage, so '66. Came January '67, I was at a loose end. I wasn't in good books with Hayden. He sacked us because we were smoking dope. And he was afraid of the police. So we did a little stint called cord surfboards for a few months, and then I started in my own little workshop at Mooloolaba. But I had no business brains. I had no brains. I was just a surf rat. And Kevin Platt came up and said, Bob, Danny Keogh has offered you a job, $10 a board to shape. I mean, boards were selling for $90, and I was going to get 1/10 of the cost of a surfboard to shape, which was unheard of. Because previous to that, I was making $3 at Hayden's, and here's his offer to come down and get $10. So I went, okay, here we go. So I went down with Kevin to Keogh's, but I had in mind as I drove down to Sydney with Kevin. I went, I'm going to do this different. I'm going to chuck away all that stuff that the Phil, the Dora, that's gone. I want to go our way. I want to do what Greenough's doing. And the only way I can see to do it right away is to make boards shorter, just start chopping them down, put up with the horrible paddling, just get rid of volume, length, and I'll compensate by going wider. So I moved into 23s and pretty wide tail blocks. And then to make them bankable, I was parked behind a car with a V-bottom tinny in Australia, like a tinny.
Yeah, a little boat. Yeah.
I went, I was in traffic, stuck behind this thing. And I went, V-bottom. Now that should allow us to roll. And George arrived at that time. This was about February, March of '67. And George lobbed around the same time. He was here for winter. I ran the idea past him V-bottom. He said, yeah, that'll work. That'll help you roll those things, you know. So straight away, I talked to Nat about it, and the Australian titles was coming up in Bells Beach. I guess it was April, at Easter.
Yeah.
Which became the Rip Curl contest, the Rip Curl Bells. The Australian titles was on down there. Talked to Nat. Nat went and shaped one straight away with the V-bottom, and I went and shaped 2 or 3. I even actually I got Robert Keneally excited and Paul Witzik excited. And I actually made 2 6/6s.
Wow.
With double concaves through it. And
wow.
Yeah, which is unusual. And that was really jumped way forward. And it took those down, and Keneally didn't like it, gave it back to me because he was really good on longboards.
Yeah.
Paul Witzik was, how can I say, he's an entrepreneur, and he could see that I was going somewhere with something. So, I was pretty broke. So he financed that board, really, for me to surf. So we lobbed at Bells Beach for April. Nat went and won the Australian titles and did beautifully on his V-bottom and incredible turns. You can see that in Hot Generation. But it was still a 9.5. Meantime, I was around at Winky Pop. I didn't go in the contest. I was part of my anti-contest protest.
Mm-hmm.
And I just camped at Winky for the next week and rode a huge variety of boards that I'd taken down. I'd also made a Greenough esque 9'8" gun, and a straight tail rocker. What a beast that was. And I also had a basic involvement board and these 2 6.6s. And they were the first blow at the shortboard. And so I rode, no one saw me down there. I was just camped by myself down at Winky while the event's going on up the point.
Yeah.
And in the final, there's later on people were saying, well, where's Bob in 67? Where's the Australian title? Where's he? I was around at Winky, falling in love with the place in a beautiful way. It's so much better than Bell's.
Yeah.
And I was filling around with these interesting boards. I found the 6.6s paddle power was pathetic. I'd also made them too stiff. Once again, George's rocker.
But you had concave in one of them. You said you put concave in.
Both of them had double
that must have
concave.
given you some speed, right? Some lift and speed, I imagine.
Incredible speed, incredible lift, but no comfort.
Right.
So I thought something was wrong. It wasn't right. So straggled back to Sydney and immediately jumped in and made a solid. I went back to 8 foot and put the big V in the tail, which gave tail rail rocker. It gave the board rail rocker because of the deep V. And that board was fabulous. I put it in the water at Avalon at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I didn't hit the sand until 6 o'clock that night. I surfed for 8 hours straight on that board. And the first wave on it at South Avalon, it was blowing a light southerly. It took up it on first wave, drop and bottom turn, and the thing just flew off the bottom turn because it had flat panels. Previous we'd had roll bottoms in the back. That was the involvement. It was all roll bottom. And suddenly you were surfing on flat panels. So the thing just flew. And then into the cutback, I said, well, I never marked. The cutback was really difficult because it had so much drive in the corners. And so I'm going to spend all day mastering this thing till I can get a cutback out of it. And so I did. I just surfed for 8 hours and finally stepped on the beach and up at North Avalon because the wind had gone through the cycle of the light southerly, around to the east, around to the northeast. So I surfed all along the beach and ended up North Ave in the corner. And the boys had lit a fire on Sunset because it was, this is April, early May. And the guys lit a fire and I managed to surf into the fire, stepped off and went, that's it. That's the end of Mickey Dora. That's the end of Phil. This is somewhere else we're going. So back to Keogh's, made a smaller one.
Now, was that the Plastic Fantastic?
Plastic
the one you surfed at Avalon was the Plastic Fantastic that you rode on?
You got it. And I put it in the back of my car. And I was living at Paul Whitsick's house at Palm Beach. And I rolled up at Paul's and pulled it out of I had a junky little car I paid $150 for or something. Pulled it out of the back and Paul yelled out from the veranda, looks like a plastic machine. That's a nice name. Thank you, Paul. And so I painted plastic machine on it next day in the concave. And went through, so that was in April and May that all started. So started cutting them down shorter and shorter. But in that era, you didn't make boards overnight. I mean, you can make them quickly, sure, but you hung on to boards through that era. And like the standard might have been, for the average punter, might have been a new board each year, one board a year. And then that year, 67, was first of the rapid fire changes. You had to go smaller. And okay, my compatriots were Kevin Platt, who was shaping next to me at Keogh's. We were the two shapers. Our best riders were Baddy Trelaw, who was fabulous. Ted Spencer was riding them. Neil Purchase was a sander. He was foiling the fins, doing a fabulous job. So we had a good power pack of talent and a lot of surfers buying the boards and giving giving us feedback. So at 67 was pretty dynamic. And
what kind of changes were you making? Like after the very first plastic machine, like let's say later that week, you're like, okay, we're on to something. Let's put more V in it or less V in it, or Like what kind of feedback where did we refine?
Well, the very first one had a long concave in the nose, and then it fed into the V, like a teardrop concave that went 2/3 the length of the board, with the V panels overlapping it through the center, but then a deep V in the tail. And that was one I got so excited with the feeling of the turn. Kevin suggested get rid of the edge on the concave and just blend it all through. So the next one was a blended concave to V. Meantime, those two little funny 6/6s that I'd made were just pushed to the corner. Double concave, nose to tail, and just pushed it to the corner and kind of forgotten about it. Then a little later that year, the Wind and Sea crew came through.
Yes.
Skip and I talked all night.
Let me ask you a question about that real quick. The Wind and Sea Surf Club showed up at Palm Beach for a surf contest. Through some research that I did, there was a tone that the Australians were wanted to show the Americans this new design concept and the new way to surf, this involvement surfing. Is that a truism, or do you think that's embellishment on the part of what I read? Or was there a real sense that you guys were going to show the Wind and Sea Surf Club guys that the Phil and Mickey era is over?
No, it was not intentional. It was we were just so excited and progressive, and but Scott, 67 was the summer of love. It was peace, love, and happiness.
Yeah.
The culture at the time was brotherhood. So
Right.
it wasn't like the media have tried to paint it as being competitive. But in reality, like when Hinson and Skip lobbed, like particularly Skip and I just formed a bond at that time. As I said, the first night we got to Crescent, we talked all night about surfing till the sun came up. Sitting in the car talking till the sun came up, and then we hit the water and surfed all day. And we just wanted to share knowledge, and so yeah, socially. So the radio is on there all day in the factory. So the station or TUW. There's Bob Dylan. Everybody must get stoned. There's the Stones. Then there's the first global video broadcast by the Beatles was that year. And all you need is love. Dun, 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 dun. So the whole planet was swaying towards the hippie culture and the summer of love in San Francisco. So it was just a mood of brotherhood. And the surfing, Bob Evans tried to paint it as Australia versus America. We're not interested in that crap. Yeah. And the voiceover in Fantastic Plastic Machine movie, they had Dennis the Menace. He acted, it was the voice. And the script written by those guys was just trying to make a commercial, but it wasn't like that. It was fun. We just wanted to surf, and we're all surfers, and we just wanted to surf better and better and better. Yeah. And the vibe was just electric and dynamic and moving so quickly. And there was LSD involved, but that didn't last that long. You kind of realized that who needs that stuff.
What are your thoughts on LSD?
Through that era, 67, 68, 69, we took a lot of acid, smoked a lot of pot. I think it confused a lot of things. By 70, I'd given it up, and for no other reason than that the revolution failed. Yeah. We thought this was the revolution to fix planet Earth. We thought we were all going to share brotherhood, end of war, and all the resources that are spent on war are going to work on health and housing. This was the youth revolution of the planet. Yeah. This was going to be the most pivotal time in all human history. Well, it didn't take long before my friends would become dope dealers. Yeah. And then they were running off the other guy's wife. And greed was back in. And so the brotherhood, the beautiful family of love, which we thought in 67. By 68, my eyes were opening and going, human greed, can't get rid of it. It's going to wreck it. And it did. It all fell apart. So I just stopped anything to do with drugs.
Do you think that with LSD, there's a not that I would condone it, but I've heard that there's um, there's a deflation that occurs on some level, which could be a good thing if it's done properly. And I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but I've heard that there's some ego deflation, which I don't know.
I find it hard to comment, Scott, now. It
Yeah,
was 50 years ago or more.
yeah, yeah.
I've got no fond memories of it.
Okay, good, fair enough. So tell me a little bit more about you know you and Skip, the Win and See crew. The story is, of course, over here in San Diego, that Skip came back with one of your boards, or with the concept.
Yeah, but the concept was very poorly cooked. So when Nat and I showed up in Hawaii for the Duke contest, we foolishly just made some big plastic machines thinking we needed paddle power at sunset. And they were dogs. The boards are horrible. And I guess, I've been of two minds ever since. Because I actually made a beautiful 9-foot gun to take as well. But in those days, you traveled with one board. And
Yeah,
I made a beautiful flat bottom down rail, not quite down rail. It was still had a little bit of Bob Shepherd influence in it. So, and Bob Shepherd influenced
yeah,
Brewer.
yeah,
So I met Shepherd. I went to Hawaii in '63 before all
yeah,
this. I'd stowed away on a ship to Hawaii. And I'd seen Bob Shepherd's work before
yeah.
Brewer had emerged as a hero. Shepherd was the man.
Oh yeah,
He was on the point at sunset, lived in a house, with turtle shells on the wall, and he hunted that turtle, and eaten it. Shepherd was a mind blower,
yeah.
and his beautiful, sleek guns. And when they had high-low rails, which were horrible, but
So you made a beautiful like a Shepherd style surfboard, and then you had also this V bottom, and you're like, which one should I take?
exactly, and it was such a quandary. No, let's go experimental. That's always the Shepherd's being done.
Yeah,
That was small. Shepherd was into the 10 footers, 11 footers, stuff like that. And so I said, let's do something different, Nat. We'll just take these beasts. I gave mine away to a hippie on Maui. I hated it so much. And then Skip, your original question, Skip came back in '67 and made one and hated it, of course. But because it was with Gordon Smith and Larry wanted to make some products, so they knew there was some change coming from Australia. So the V bottoms that were produced in '68 were pretty disgusting. But by then, so I'd lobbed at George's house at Santa Barbara up in Montecito, and I went and I'd had enough influence from Brewer's beautiful templates. So I hung on Maui with Brewer for a while.
Look, can we go back to that for just a sec, Bob? Because somebody told me, it might have been you, and again, correct my history here, that you got off the plane in '68 for the contest at sunset, and you literally drove from the airport and put on your jersey and paddled out, and you weren't necessarily warmed up. You weren't like ready for 8-foot Sunset Beach right off the plane. And there was some, I mean, give yourself a little bit of a break here.
Well, a bit more to the story. Nat and I, we had arrived a week earlier, and I paddled up right away with Hinson and Nueva. And once again, there were political things. They were trying to structure this as the Australian attack. Oh, that rubbish, But no, I hung with Hinson because he was a dynamic thinker, and people buzzed around Hinson. He was the glue pot for all the people, all the characters. And Nueva had a little house right next door, North Shore on the lane there at Sunset. Hinson Nueva had his own house next door. And we all piled into one of the old bombs and drove around to Makaha. And I had my plastic machine. And I hadn't surfed it. It's off the plane. But this is a week before the sunset event. Drove around to Makaha. And I was walking down the beach, and all the local black kids, the dark Hawaiian boys, the local boys were going, that'll never work. Look at that crazy surfboard. And including George Downing. And George paddled out, and he really purposely tried to work me over. George was the king, and he's this little howling interloper. So he dropped, I took off on a nice 4-foot Makaha wave, and Downing dropped in on me and started fading left. Okay. And he says, okay, we can do this. So he starts pushing left, and he's pushing further and deeper. And I go, we're not going to make this wave if he doesn't turn soon. So I said, well, the only way to get around this was, so I pumped on my left rail, drove left away from him, and then swooped into a plastic machine, bottom turn, went up over his tail block and down through the little bowl, and he got dusted and wiped out. And I overtook him and made the wave. And he was really he was trying to hold me back in the whitewater. And so when I walked up the beach later, all the local kids go, hey man, what is that thing you got there? What is that? You just dusted George. And it was exciting. And Henson said, I've got to find out what that turn is. I've got to get that turn into my boards. Yeah. So that was the outcome of that. So then Nueva said, let's get across to Maui because there's going to be a nice swell and Honolulu is going to be great. I said, oh, I've got no money. I don't have that Maui. He said, come on, I'll take care of you. Henson, Nueva booked us a flight just on Aloha Airlines. We landed in Maui. We had some beautiful Honolulu. Before there were any cameras, no one around, just me and him, and we surfed, what's the name of the next joint? Some beach breaks near the Lahaina. We surfed some fun beach breaks in there. Had to get back for the Duke event. We couldn't get an Aloha flight, so we took a little rubber band from the leeward side. There was a little airport out on Honolulu side. Yeah. So we flew back another rubber band plane, and I didn't have a board. And so it comes the morning of the Duke event. My board was in Maui, but it was going to be picked up. Someone was going to send it back with the Aloha Airlines. So the morning of the event, I've got no board. And along comes Randy Rarick. I just met Randy for the first time. And Randy said, I'll drive you into the airport and get your board. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. You're very generous. He was 17 and I was 22, 23, so a few years younger than me. But we jumped in his van, drove him to the airport, grabbed my board, got at sunset just as the heat was called, paddled out. But I was familiar with the board. I knew the board. I knew how its a couple of good points was that it had a sweet long bottom turn. But it could spin out real easy at sunset at 8 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at sunset that day, there was no media to show it, but there's a great photo. It was in Surfer Journal a couple of issues ago, and you can see the thing spinning out. Yeah. But you can see the little lip at the top. So like after that spin out, it recovered and went up into the little lip and got a little cover up, not really a barrel, but a little cover up at the top.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's what Lopez later raved about in interviews, was that the first time he'd seen a surfboard go vertical and tuck under the lip. Yeah. And that board could do that, which was kind of.
And I also heard about that wave that Rarick was on the beach standing next to Dewey Weber. Correct. And they looked at each other and went, something's going on here. We're not sure what it is, but Bob is on to something.
That was basically it. Yeah, that's as Greg Knoll later called it. Said he was on the beach too, and he said, "Well, I kicked the ball."
Yeah.
We kicked the ball. Now we're on our way.
But you went back to Maui. You went back to Maui, right? And that's where they got.
Yeah, went back. Yeah. Because Paul Witzik arrived with cameras and stuff, and we were living on a yacht in Lahaina, which was fun. And we went out to Honolulu Bay and had a really good day there. And Nat and I managed the boards,
I'd say you did more than manage them. I thought you guys surfed them really well. I mean, that was really the session where everyone went, okay, sunset was an anomaly. They were actually onto something.
Yeah, because we were kind of getting used to the boards by then. But no, I was over it. The real problem with it, Scott, was that my foot was still way in front of the fin. And the V bottom allowed you to turn from way forward because it's very neutralized in the back end.
Yeah.
the
It was
shortboard
obvious that,
surfing.
yeah.
Okay, so shortboard surfing only really came alive when you got your foot over the fin, the same as George had his ankles over the fin.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't true shortboarding until January when I got to Cali, staying at George's house, and I went and shaped one at Rennie Yeager's place, the really classic, nice template.
Yeah.
7.6 and 7 around that realm.
And have you
And then
toned down the V bottom at this point?
Oh,
Have you
yeah.
toned it
Yeah,
way
I
down.
got rid of it. The V was too freaky, so we pulled it back to a very shallow V.
Just a very
And-
shallow V. Yeah.
Yeah, and a nice template with
Yeah.
some brewer influence, so it pointed nose, but a foolish point,
Yeah.
And so, but then Carl Pope offered me a gig, you're going to do a thing with Maury Pope, and their factory was where Patagonia is now, down on C Street. And so Michael Cundiff was the sander there, and he was excited. And so I went and I shaped one at Maury Pope's, and that board was phenomenal. And I surfed Rincon. Rincon fired for the next 6 weeks. So January, February of '68, I got rid of the DV.
That must have been special.
That was it for me. We had it all together. And
So that's where the shortboard really not germinated, but was birthed, was in Rincon in Santa Barbara with you in '68.
Absolutely. That was it. That was,
and that's
zero.
because your foot was on the back of the fin finally.
Exactly. And it was a tricky fin. It was George's. Tom Morey had made the first fin box system, and he'd made a Greenough Stage 4 with. It was made in polycarbonate, very stiff plastic, but they'd injected 30% glass into it, so you could actually foil the plastic fin. So we went back to Greenough's and foiled that thing down and dipped it in acetone to smooth it out. So it was a hand foil glass plastic fin, and that thing was amazing. And the whole board was just my best board ever in my whole life. That was the best board.
Yeah. And wow, that's amazing.
Well, George had friends on the point, owned a house there. So we'd park down in amongst the houses, rather on the highway. Yeah. And we'd run through the guy's backyard out to the creek, little creek mouth there.
Yeah.
And wait
for
the big set. When the set would just clear, we'd paddle out at the end of the last wave of the set, sit at indicators, work our way up as high as we could at indicators. We were taken off on only the perfect sets, one each, the 2 set waves. George had one, I had the other, not another soul around. We'd surf down bowl after bowl, indicators approaching the point, and there'd be 50 guys at least sitting on longboards on the point, staring in at you as you're coming down. Are you going to make it or not? Are they going to drop on you or not? And there were sand-sucking bowls inside that we were driving through the sand suckers, getting into the point. And quite often, 2 or 3 guys would just fade on the shoulder. But you come through with so much speed, you just fly over their tail box, run out on the shoulder, do a big roundhouse. They just get tumbled in the water, and their boards would wash into the highway. And then you just surf the inside to the highway, grab your board, pick it up, warm up by a fire, run around, do it again.
And those boards, were those boards like 7'10" or how long?
7'10", 21, 21 wide. And 2 3/4. Good rails, because even the plastic machine had good rails. They were all round rails.
Where are those boards now?
Oh, I wish. One of the guys at Maury Pope's got hold of that board. And when I went to Bali, I didn't go to Bali until '94, and I paddled out at Sanua, and that guy said, "Bob, I got your board from Rincon." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, it was the best board I've ever had. I surfed it for the next 10 years. It finally died." And so I just started, it had a life after I left. So I came back to Australia, I started making one after the other. It became the tracker series in Australia. And in that period from 68, 69, boards come right down to 6 foot.
So the tracker was really the magic board for you.
Yes, but not the tracker that was marketed by Maury Pope.
No, but the one that you made, either in Rennie's shop or at,
I call it the Rincon. we produce it as the Rincon model, and it's a big hit still now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, what about going into the 70s? Like there's not this look, it was a bit of a dark period here in California. I don't know what was going on in Australia other than it feels like Michael Peterson was owning all of the media landscape, and probably Nat a little bit too, and maybe Midget at the very end of his career. What were you doing in, say, 70 to 75?
Well, marriage and babies came along,
Mm-hmm.
and so but seeing in California how beautiful the countryside was, but how it was getting built out. I came back to Australia and went, I'm out of the city. No more Sydney for me. And so I moved to Lennox straight away, and because Lennox was the warm water point break that took south swell, so it could easily hold 10, 12 feet. So it was empty, no one there, just a few local kids. So I moved there with Lynn, and we started having babies, and I surfed Lennox, and I guess I was heading in to become the old shaper of town. And of course I was influenced strongly by the Hawaiian, the Jerry Lopez lightning bolt push.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't stop shaping one bit.
Yeah.
I was on the encyclopedia of surfing. It's got some entry about me that I faded out or disappeared. There's no way. I mean, I've just been a surfboard maker all my life and shaper. And like in, say, 72, I worked for Barry Bennett for 1 year, and I was shaping really lovely boards, and they were ending up, even the Surfline guy, he was buying shipments from us in Sydney. He was buying my boards for the shop in Honolulu. Just as the guy who started the surf shops back in time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was developing nice point boards for Lennox. As a Lennox junkie, most of my boards were 6/4 pins, wing pins. I got intrigued by swallowtails after watching literal birds, swallows, hunting insects off the cliff at Lennox in the evening, with hunting gnats and bugs in the air, swooping around and studying their tail. And so I immediately made some swallowtails. We found out later Ben Iper was doing something in Hawaii. His were like V's. Mine were actually fully sculpted tails.
Uh-huh.
And so that, when we found swallowtails in the 6/4, 6/6 realm, was off the roof, were phenomenal. And it was all down the line surfing. It was like Rincon was the queen of the coast. Sunset was probably the world's best wave overall. I loved both those waves to death. Loved them. So Lennox was, like, to me, a combination of those two. It's kind of never as perfect as Rincon, but more exciting, like Sunset. And it had sections that would throw and hit you and slap you around, but you could set up barrels as well. So I was really heavy into Lennox through the early 70s. I'd surf Lennox in the mornings, surf the pass in the afternoon, because everybody went short. Anyone who had a longboard in Australia was a kook.
Yeah.
And you were ashamed to walk down the beach if you walked down with them. Seriously. And that was like from 58, 69. And I went, that's stupid. Logs are fabulous in 1 foot, 2 foot point waves. They're incredible. So I always had a log, a 9.3 Noosa style log that I'd surf in the afternoons at the pass and surf in the morning at Lennox. And I started shaping my own. I worked for Sam One in Byron Bay after that, and then we developed a thing called the Bluebird, which is that it was the Bluebird was the logo of the swallowtail. The swallow bird back on the deck, and that became really popular in Australia, and a lot of good surfers started their surfing live on the bird, and we still make that today as well.
You mentioned Jerry Lopez, and
Jerry.
Yeah, you mentioned Jerry Lopez, and And Jerry's often cited Mike Hinson as a guy who changed surfboard design at one point with that down rail. And I'm wondering, at what point did you and the Australian
Here's
surfing
the,
community, yeah, fill me in on the Hinson down rail and where it belongs relative to Australian surfboard design history.
well, fortunately, I heard Hank Warner's podcast a month ago, and he had the gem on that. But I'll tell you the piece that no one else knows. It was Hinson and I and Brewer standing in the car park at Pipeline in the park in March of 1969. So this is year on from all this. Right? Everyone's riding 6'4", 6'6" by now, but with roll bottoms, generally soft bottoms. And if you look at the boards that Nat, Ted Spencer, and Wayne Lynch were riding in that era in those movies, they went to France and travelled. Those boards were disgusting. Everything was short and roll bottom. There was just no power.
Yeah.
This whole influence of George's is still locked in there. So we're in the car park, March of '69, and Brewer and Hinson and I, along comes Marcus Freckles, and he walks by with this 4-inch thick board. And he wasn't a stand-up surfer, he was a knee boarder. And he had rails that were like that. They were dead, vertical, square on the top part. The top part of the rail, he glassed in some handles, had a pipe so he could do El Rolos, was the theory in the barrel. But the rails on the bottom were just razor sharp right angles. And it was shaped by Vinnie Bryant on Maui.
Uh-huh.
And his little cadre of characters were making some bizarre boards. So Hinson and Brewer and I go, that'll never work. And like Bunker's walking by with his blonde hair and his little white board shorts, and he's got this beautiful blonde in the white bikini on his arm. And you go, what a show. He paddles out in head-high pipe, takes off in his first wave, and this guy, he just flies down through this thing so quick. We went, what? He did it another 4 times. See you later, boys. We all flew back to our various shaping rooms, and we all immediately made a hard down rail. I took mine out at Curl in Sydney, worst wave in Australia, but it actually was good that day. I made it in one day, paddled out early next morning, took off my first wave, it just flew. And it just did the Bunker Spreckles thing, and this was a 6'6". And just went bang, 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 and did it a dozen times and went, okay, now let's time the barrel. And started to climb high and hold the line high. No way. That thing just wanted to slide off the face and head for the bottom. So I rode that board that day. That went back to the Keogh factory in Sydney that day. And I immediately, well, now I was living in Angari, but this was, I was in Sydney. I was just back from Hawaii in Sydney for a couple of weeks. So trashed that board, made another one straight away with a little bit of soft roll, and under it was a 75-25 rail. That thing went unbelievable. Flat bottom, tiny bit of V in the tail. And it was insane. It was so good. Now back to Hank Warner. Hank's interview, he said where Hinson made it work for California, rocker.
Yeah,
tail rocker. Put the Hinson on the carpet with no fin, take the fin out of the fin box, stick it on the carpet, and tail rock. And so the super hard down rail, Hinson got it to work beautifully because he had rocker. And I love what Hinson did with those down rails. And I emulated his glasswork straight away. I was glassing the white bottom cut back, inserting a pastel panel in the deck. Because he was marketing it with beautiful glassing as well.
Yeah.
So full respect to Hinson, but the idea came from
Vinnie
Bryant.
Wow.
Vinnie Bryant via Bunker Spreckles. That's where the down rail came from. And
that's amazing.
I was there, I saw it, and I learnt it. I did it. I made the thing. Yeah.
That's amazing.
From that, the next evolution was a small radius in the bottom of the rail.
Right.
Jerry started shaping then, and that's what he did instead of making super hard down rails. Instead of making 75-25s,
right.
He bought them, put a little radius at the bottom.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
In Australia, they had a 20-cent coin, and that was my template.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, so You're just making boards in the 70s. You're making
Yes.
boards. You're obviously competing. You're older. You've got a family.
Yep.
You're watching. Well, I guess I don't know what you're doing, but me as a kid, I'm watching Rabbit and PT and Michael Peterson, and I'm hearing about this, in 77, 78. And it seems like surfing from a professional standpoint is starting to take off. It's got legs. The IPS has been created with Fred and Randy. And what are you doing in the late 70s?
Surfboard making. Um, After the Duke event, I never competed again. I only went in it because I had the ticket bought and a trip to Hawaii. I sort of had an anti-contest thing going. To me, surfing at that point in 69, 70, I made a decision. I will surf well. I'll keep my surfing tuned in, but for the one reason is to feel surfboards. I was never interested in contests from then on. I still don't care. I mean, occasionally I watch something on the WSL if it's a great event, more just to see a couple of waves of some incredible surfing.
Yeah.
But I surf to feel surfboards. And my son Ben, who's 50, he's the same. He surfs to feel how surfboards work.
Yeah.
And we've given our whole surfing dedication to surfboard design, not to the sport of surfing doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the surfboard performance, but not the sport. So I don't give a damn about who wins what.
If I could take you back to the Santa Barbara time in life in 68 in Rincon and stuff, you mentioned that the swell was just really good, like that 3 or 4 month stretch that you were there. The waves were just pumping. You must have surfed some magnificent sort of out of the way spots that are of course now crowded, but you must have been by yourself. Did you go up to the ranch with Rennie? Did you surf down at Muscle Shoals, or was it just Rincon the whole time?
No, we went out probably George. We put the boat in at Gaviota and up the pier and went up to a ranch a couple of times. Even Carl Pope took me to the ranch the year after. The outer islands, the Santa Rosa and the San Miguel Islands, surfed out there with George frequently. When it was too small for Rincon, it was still getting nice swell from the Aleutians out on Santa Rosa. Mm-hmm. Beautiful left-hander out there. We surfed a lot.
Yep.
Trips out there were really exciting. Just, George's marine skills are unbelievable. Like one foggy day, we went out and we'd drive for half a mile and stop and listen for ships motor, the boom, 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 boom of a ship coming through the fog. And because you gotta, I guess, go fast in that little Boston water it is, and you come flying out of the fog into a hull, and you're gonna die. So George is amazing, and all our trips out there were fabulous. Coming at night with dolphins in the or lit up in the phosphorescence, and dolphins under the hull at night, heading into Santa Barbara. No, George was amazing, and his skills in the water were fabulous.
Yeah.
So we hit lots of spots down to San Diego, hanging out with Skip too.
Oh, good, cool.
But all my life, like I've made a point of finding empty waves and new breaks, and that's why we pioneered a lot of breaks along the East Coast here. Not that you do it for any reason except that you've got uncrowded waves.
Yeah.
Like I still surf uncrowded waves.
Yeah.
Just because I know the banks, I watch every day. I'm checking several times a day.
Yeah.
I come home for lunch with my wife and I check all the breaks on the way to work, the factory shape. And drive back, check the breaks again, what's happened in those 4 hours. After lunch, I'll drive back out again, check them again, and I'll hit, if it's good and uncrowded at one of the spots, I'll paddle out and get it. But it's got to be uncrowded.
Yeah. Good for you. What about, I was lucky enough to be at Byron one year for the contest or Noosa, excuse me. And we went up to Double Island Point, and wow, what a neat spot. I'm sure you've surfed that a few times.
We were the first. I mean, George and I and Bob Cooper were the first to surf it in '64.
Yeah.
And George was the one that cooked up the trip. We found fishermen who were driving up there in big fat wheels, old Ford Mercuries, and etc. with big aircraft DC-3 tires on the back, all ex-war tires, and so and big V8s. So we fanged up there and surfed the point up there. Unbelievable. George and I surfed on the outer near Wolf Rock on the outer tip, and plus all the bay.
Yeah.
But I surfed it with my wife, just the two of us, just not that long ago.
Oh, good.
Got up there on a weekday and cracked it for ourselves.
Beautiful.
So, we love DI. My son and I are specialists at finding empty waves still.
Yeah.
And that's our daily thing. Is to hunt local breaks and see what's cracking.
Yeah, there's something about as we get older, we seem to be able to find the empty ones. We don't want the crowded ones anymore.
I'm not interested.
Me either. Let me ask you a simple question. What is the greatest surfing you've ever witnessed?
Oh, Kelly Slater. Sorry, without a doubt.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago at Kira, the roundhouse he did was the most precise, in-trim, powered maneuver. And then
I agree. I totally agree.
Phenomenal.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
And how his fins held and how the rail held through that arc. I mean, that was an excellent surfboard and excellent fin settings, and it's just perfect power application. And of course, his body talking was exceptional. But just to me, I was looking at the board performance and how someone could take that limit,
Yeah.
It was all about board performance.
Yeah. Yeah. He's pretty incredible. Tell me about the board you made for Steph recently. You made some V bottom, some version. What do we call that? What's going on with that design?
It's a plastic machine, but it's the son of, we finally got the V bottom working. Yeah. But I was talking to Kelly about it a couple of days ago, and I go, well, I still think diamond tails aren't right. There's too much force in the corner.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'd rather see swallows or wing pins, or I think there's much nicer, much friendlier tails than diamond tails. But we did it that way to prove that the V bottom could actually work by creating stiff rocker in the center, a la George, but with the V in the tails creates rail rocker. Right. So Steph's board worked, but it's a single fin. Single fins are slow, and we did it to prove that you could actually make the V bottom work. I mean, I'm all over quads, plus twinser effect. I mean, the quads with the bigger fins in the back and the small fins at the front. That's more on the money right now.
Yeah,
and they're faster.
Yeah,
more speed, more control.
Yeah.
So I actually urged Kelly to swap one around on his board. To ask him if you do me a favour and just put the front fins in the back and the little fins in the front just before a session this week. Just please try it for me and give me a report. So he said, yep, I'll do it. Because I think now, by putting the big fins closer to the stringer, more right under your foot, you've given the most powerful part of your fins smack under your foot. Whereas in the quad, you've got the little just in front of where you should be.
Interesting.
Plus, there's the mysterious and interesting twinser effect, which we still don't understand properly. I mean, it's a bit like a Hobie jib on a mainsail of the Hobie. You put the jib up and the boat goes twice as quick. Why? It's something about clean water being fed onto the main fin. So there's a lot to learn in that realm right now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't know if you know, but each year we do a best in show category, and this year is the twinser. We're doing the twinser design as the category. So board builders around the world are invited to enter. Anyone can enter. It's free. And we'll see a lot of really unique, interesting twinser designs, and you'll get a chance to put your eyes on it.
Fantastic. Well, I made my first twinser in 78. When what's the guy's name? Jobson? Joe?
Yeah, Will Jobson.
Will Jobs. When he first made one, I immediately made one. Went out at Lennox, fastest I've ever surfed. It was unbelievable. Yeah. I was come off a twin fin onto that. I went, this thing's insane. Yeah. But then Simon came on with the front. Well, it must have been 70. It must have been 80, because then Simon.
6 months later, you're on a 3-fin.
Yeah, I trashed the twinser for a 3-fin. Yeah. But still, I've always had in mind the speed, and that's why I really welcome quads coming back 10 years ago. Yeah. Working on good fin positions with quads.
Yeah.
So no. There's still more to develop with fins.
Yeah, I agree. You bring up an interesting point, which is like, in 67, even in 65, 66, 67, 68, you guys are going through so many different board design concepts and ideas. And a lot of it just got pushed to the side. You probably had a board and you're like, this board is a piece of shit. And you just pushed it to the side. And it might have been a piece of shit, but it wasn't because of what you thought. It might have been something completely else. And that idea got buried. And it's time now that we bring some of these ideas back, much like the Twins are kind of got quickly buried by Simon.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a very interesting surfboard company, and we make a vast variety of boards, and we recycle a lot of all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, we keep going back and have a look at the hulls and have another look at them, and like Greg Little and what the guys in Cali do, the hull freaks. We keep looking at their stuff, and we try it all, but we found some things were wrong. Just some principles were wrong. The fastest board is the dead straight rocket, wrong. Single fin's the fastest fin, wrong. Quads are faster. Twins, it's faster again. And it's logical. The way the water flows off the bottom of the board, it's people aren't thinking straight until you get to understand how the water flow works off the board. It flows like your hand. The water splays out like your fingers. It doesn't just run straight. First, it splays off the bottom, but also it's running diagonal at all times from different angles of attack. They're always diagonal. So single fins are always accepting diagonal water flow, which is not healthy, not easy. But multiple fins, you reduce that effect tremendously, and you're getting water flow straight down those fins more often than not.
Yeah, interesting. I love it. I love that you're always thinking about this stuff, and it's all about the surfboard design and how the board works in the water. It's great.
That's all I'm fascinated by. And my son and George the same. We're fascinated by how it works.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a couple. I'm going to throw a few names at you real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. Wayne Lynch. Give me a couple words on Wayne Lynch.
Wayne's got very good flexible joints. His ankles are super flexible. I made him the first eggs. I made him an egg, stood him on a blanket and sketched it around his feet back in 1969. Remarkable, incredibly good surfer, Wayne. Yeah, it's I won't go into all the stuff that's happened. Yeah, but Wayne, and when he won in the 70s, when he came back and won the surfer bout or something in Sydney, people cheering for him, because that's one contest I wanted to see. One of our buddies win in a highly competitive era.
Well, and I apologize. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know if there's any. I'm throwing names at you, and I don't even know that where they are. How about Dick Van Stralen?
Dick started shaping the same time as I did back in '62, but he went to England through all the exciting times, and he kind of missed Dick missed the shortboard revolution because he was shaping in England. But when he came back, through the 70s, he made a real lot of great surfboards in that lightning bolt era. And Burley was his playground, so many good surfers.
Yeah.
And he's still a great shaper. I think his big 10, 12 years ago, he made some really fantastic big fish. They were outstanding. So much good results from them.
Yeah. Well, look, we've got the BoardRoom coming up here, the BoardRoom International Surfboard Show. We're so honored, Bob McTavish, to have you as our icon of foam. We've got shapers lined up that are going to be honoring you. We've got Michael Arenal. We've got Jordan Brazy. We've got your friend Moon from Korea. We have a shaper from Korea coming out, which is very exciting. We've got Axel Lorenz from Europe, from Portugal. We've got Ryan Birch. We've got Josh Hall, Grant Noble, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody here, but Well, we've got quite a lineup of guys. You've selected a really solid crew of guys. It's going to be a fun weekend of surfboard design and surfboard shaping and just everybody getting together as a tribe and celebrating, much like the summer of '67. We hope.
When you invited me to us pick shapers, I immediately ran through Skip Fry. We wanted
Hanky.
to get Tom Parrish, George, Jeff McCoy, who passed away last week,
Yeah.
Rennie Yater.
Yeah.
I had all this lineup of characters, Greg Webber, Al Merrick. But then I started to realize, hey, these guys are old. They don't want to shape. I needed some young guys. But I'm dragging a couple of characters in to judge, a couple of surprise characters.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And look, there'll be many people coming out to say hello to you and many old friends of yours that you probably haven't seen in a long time. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to that weekend. It's going to be good.
Great, mate. I'm looking forward to it heaps. Thank you for inviting
All right.
me.
You bet. So, Bob, we've said a lot. I appreciate your time here this morning, and you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Scott. It's a real privilege. Thank you.